everyone. Thank you very much for coming today. I just wanted to do a quick introduction. My name is James Coates. I am an enterprise seller for Verkada, and doing this about 20 years in technology sales. Really just wanted to give an overview of what Verkada is and how really AI kind of ties into kind of how we're building this out. And really, when we look at platforms here, so Verkada is a physical security company built in the cloud, hybrid, but also owns all the AI and develops it at the edge. And really, when we look at enterprise, what are their main focuses right now is trying to find a way to, number one, have a holistic view of their enterprise using platforms, using AI, using technology, and how do you kind of stitch that into into that fabric of a single pane of glass. And that's really where we kind of excel and really where the future is going in terms of this. So we had a presentation with the managing director, the top guy for Deloitte last year, and really what he was kind of explaining to a lot of the customers, the big banks, healthcare, is around the convergence of cybersecurity and physical security, really, and getting that together because it's, there's so much invested at firewalls and the edge and all these cyber breaches. But really, when you start looking at your infrastructure and your locations, are you able to get the insights and protect those as the same way, right? And so really, this is where Verkada has come into play. And, I think everyone will kind of, all the presentations that they see today or talk about is like RTO, RPO. And really, when you look at kind of physical, like security breaches or anything like that, really to take those types of, and stitch it into a story takes hours or days and makes it extremely difficult to be able to action in a way that's reactive, but now you can start becoming more proactive. So really, really, really critical. When we actually kind of boil it down into what it would take the average person through legacy technology is for a 1-minute incident could be anywhere from 10 to 60 minutes, which is difficult, especially when you're managing multiple locations, multiple enterprises, multiple, different types of scenarios where you may have manufacturing, you may have the office buildings, you may have all these different retailers. It makes it very difficult, and you also have to understand who actually owns getting this data for you. And then when you start accessing now an event or even someone going through a building, now you're doing that multi-camera multiplier where you're looking at footage and you're trying to timestamp it and you're trying to bring it together. So this is really where the platform comes into play and the challenges that it brings, right? So it's also that burn rate and really how long does it take to be able to get all these different stakeholders in the room, finding out who does it, giving it to either health and safety, police, anything like that, law enforcement. It really does cost the organization a lot of money, and how do you avoid that? So when we look at kind of the typical architecture on basically anything physical security, we look at, basically the bottlenecks right now. So you have the choke points of basically managing all of your network traffic. Now you have it all coming back to a centralized spot, which makes it very difficult. When we think of on-premise technology, it's a single point of failure, and you can lose a location or an enterprise in a blink of an eye, right? And so that makes it very difficult, and it's a lot of risk. And when you start looking at expansions, modernization, it's very difficult to be able to, finding server, doing all the wiring, all that stuff scaling is extremely difficult. It's resource intensive. Whereas with AI now and with cloud technology, you can literally take an access card or an access control or a camera and scan the QR code and get it into your enterprise system in 5 minutes. And then the compounding hardware debt. I think anyone in technology right now, when you see all of these stocks of storage and chips and stuff like that, it's ballooned. It's become such an expense that's unmitigated. And you look at, a couple years ago it was VMware when Broadcom got it, and they shot up their ELAs, and now we're seeing it now. Like, it's so unpredictable for IT teams and everyone else to be able to actually forecast their spend based on market conditions, right? So what do we do that kind of takes the risk and also brings more of these parts of your ecosystem into like that architecture that you're looking for? So we get rid of those NVRs, DVRs. We start taking the wires out of the walls for access control or doors. Really being able to take out that legacy hardware and now start creating accessibility. And accessibility, because of this cloud architecture, is what you're able to do is now access it from anywhere, from any device, as long as you have the right credentials. So it's zero trust, but if you have the proper credentials, you can look it on your phone, you can look on it on your computer, anywhere that you have the right access, you can now manage your entire enterprise from that platform. When we look at technology stacks now, we think of a camera or an access control as that, they don't really do anything other than capture footage, right? And it goes to a centralized storage. Where our technology and where the technology is going now is actually bringing the chipsets and the edge computing directly to these devices so that it can start like actually computing and making decisions based on what it's seeing in real time. And how our technology works and how AI is driven is that everything that we build from our stack up is 4x the chipsets that give you the ability to adapt to AI, right? Because you never know how much you're going to need, but if you start investing in long-term platforms and an enterprise-grade security, you got to be able to change with the times, right? And so that's really where the industry is going. And then again, being able, not having to manage servers, everything like that, you can now start doing global campus deployments very eloquently and easily because you're now not managing those legacy hardware and kind of going back into your data center, right? So when we did a study, excuse me, with 1,500 IT professionals, and really and leaders, what they've really understood is that physical security needs to start becoming cloud-based. We always start looking at, I would compare kind of legacy physical hardware, physical security as like the AS400, if people remember that, where it's very bulky, does one single thing, but can't adapt. It can't change. So it's going to keep doing that exact same thing, but it's only going to do that thing, right? And so really when they see the option of cloud and the flexibility of it, this is where the industry is going. Where do they see this in part of their plan is it's that transition. They're making that move now. I always see Canada as kind of, United States is a little bit more of an adopter. Canada's a little bit more risk adverse, but they're now moving more to the cloud. And I think that being able to see the kind of transition, it really is where security people are focused on. When we think of AI in general and the market size, $216 billion by 2030. Like, it's not going anywhere. It's something that you need to adapt and build, but it's like that hot button word where everyone thinks of like digital transformation and all these different things. It's what does it actually mean to your organization and how can you bring it in responsibly and also touch many different parts of your organization. They think, when we think of cloud, we think of redundancy, we think of flexibility. We also think of not managing the infrastructure. So there's a lot of alignment now that leaders don't want to be managing this type of infrastructure anymore. They want to be able to have it securely hosted and also adapted inside of their organization. And then what's the migration strategy looking like? Depending on the size of the organization, they understand that there's either a couple different options they can do. They can either jump right in or they can also just slowly introduce technologies. And really what you're able to do now with our technology and others is that you're able to now take legacy systems and add AI to them so that you're now starting to slowly but surely get yourself on a platform and then refresh and really upgrade your systems in a cost management way. So when we look at the economic reality, everyone thinks that cloud's more expensive and everything like that. when we actually look at legacy systems is that the acquisition cost may be lower, but then we see CapEx spikes because it's like a laptop. It has that life cycle management of 3 years where you're now replacing kind of legacy hardware. Whereas with cloud adoption and the fact that our system actually is guaranteed by a 10-year warranty is that people are seeing that as more as an option. And when we look at these fluctuations, there's a lot of unpredictability in here because when we think of just raw storage and chips and everything like that and these shortages, like that's not going anywhere. We see the data centers, we see the chip shortages, we see the storage shortages. So these spikes can become even more prominent and not as predictable. So when we think of the silos that we're dealing with right now, and it's just, when we look at video surveillance, access control, environmental sensors, visitor management, really what they are is a sensor. And what a sensor's best friend is another sensor. So when we think of authentication at a door, it's like, do they know that James is actually being authenticated at the door? That's a camera. So the sensor is actually auditing that system, but now adding context to whatever that system is. So maybe it's tailgating, maybe it could be any sort of incident now. You're now tying it into an actual story, right? And when we think of environmental sensors, in schools, kids like to vape in the bathrooms. When we think of hospitals, or we think of food management, or when we think of retail environments, like you want to know exactly what your parameters are at all times and adjust and get real-time alerts on that. When we think of visitor management, same thing, being able to authenticate in like healthcare, we integrate with EMRs, but then we also understand like volunteers, who's actually coming through your building and your properties, making sure that they're the right people, there at the right time, and they leave at the right time. So bringing this all into a single pane of glass is really where the industry is going, and it really takes that boring physical security into that enterprise-grade AI analytics. So when we try to optimize this out, everyone wonders like, well, what's this going to do to my network? And the way we are and how we encrypt and how we actually can now start taking network traffic off of your network. It streams dynamically, and basically only when you're looking at the footage does it take any sort of bandwidth. And then again, because you can view it from very different, maybe different people are doing investigations or they're taking data from certain things for different parts of the business, is they're only drawing from a single cloud cache stream. And then routing locally. This is where we can actually start eliminating some of that security risk and really just optimizing your network in general. So when we think of cybersecurity and what are the liabilities and how do you solve those challenges, right? And when you think of, dangerous port forwarding, like these are now, they're on your network. There is that ability to get into them. When we think of patching, like it's always like, do I want to test this? Do I trust it? Do I have to go to each one of these locations to update firmware? That creates a challenge, and it can also bring down your system. You don't necessarily want to have that QA environment, but you can. So now you don't need to do that anymore. And then again, because of where these sit in your network, DVRs and NVRs, it's like they actually are entry points into your network. So how do we design ours differently? It's completely invisible, and they only have 2 ports open, which is date and time and the internet. The date and time is obviously to timestamp it, and then the internet just to be able to access it. All of technology right now to be able to update firmware natively and get the newest product launches, offerings, dynamically change and adapt with zero downtime, makes it super easy and de-risks the platform, right? And then being able to integrate with some of your largest investments. So things like Okta, single sign-on, so zero trust, being able to tie that all into your enterprise technology natively is huge, right? Because now you're able to know who's looking at something, auditing, like being able to, with an access control, someone leaves the business or is forced out of the business, you can eliminate them and all their building access, and also know with cameras and technology if they've ever returned back to that business. So when we think of kind of where this touches different industries, And technology is the simple fact of we're now getting so multi-threaded in different parts of businesses. Being able to understand in a retail environment, being able to go in and understanding if there's sweethearting or there's discounting or understanding your theft, integrating into that. But also in retail, being able to take a person and understand through heat maps where they've gone through that retail store. Or you'll be able to monitor a slip and fall, or you can integrate with all these large systems and POS systems right into it. So now you're starting to touch different parts of the business with the same technology that you're going to need anyways. Manufacturing Q&A, being able to understand, looking at shipment codes, looking at boxes, skids coming in, understanding if there was being able to have a sensor like kind of that IoT, being able to trigger if there was a faulty product, being able to take that time in place and actually pull it right out. Being able to go through a building and understanding how can we actually make it better? What's the time this box takes to get to this place? And really being able to understand that. And then real estate optimization, same thing, right side your global real estate, understanding how many people are coming in and out. Do I need this amount of space? It can go like so many different industries, airports, or when we think of healthcare or banks, being able to understand what do I need from a real estate perspective and have all the analytics on the back end. So how do you do this, really? And it looks like a daunting thing, and I find right now there's kind of that convoluted area between IT and facilities, right? Who owns it? It's technically a network endpoint, but it's traditionally been, back in the day when it was coax or, there's all these different things that who really owns it, but now you're able to bring those teams together and actually do something for the enterprise. And so rip and replace is something that, seems daunting, but sometimes it's needed, right? And then we also have appliances now where you can add AI and analytics directly to your investments that you have in place, as simple as putting an appliance on-prem, giving you cloud capabilities, but also for access control, just changing the controller and reusing all of your other systems, right? And then a phase migration, again, get everything onto a single pane of glass. And then as your refresh schedules come with hardware, you can kind of slowly migrate into this platform with zero risk. So how do you get there, and like how we can help? We want to show it in your environment. Be able to stop by our booth, really understand how this can kind of tie into your organization. You'll be shocked, and really being able to build the business case for you. We're able to come in and say how much is this actually costing me? How much do I need to do? What's the risk that it brings to me? And then we can build you a roadmap, like an atlas, where you find out what are the key problems I need to solve right now. How can I bring in more areas of stakeholders inside the organization for AI and analytics, and really build out a way to tie it into your organization. So that's kind of just to recap it, being able to go cloud native, being able to scale quickly and constantly with AI development and owning the stack, is that we can start building tools and things that our customers actually need and that you need. So that's my presentation, and would love if any questions or clarity I can help you out with.
I have one question. There's just one aspect of letting AI do everything that leaves people not being able to do the task manually afterwards, because AI. Sorry, so this is just a case of what do people do once they've forgotten how to do the search manually, let's say, if AI does it for them all the time? Is there a fallback mechanism of any sort, some sort of, I don't know, like a manual method of doing their work afterwards?
So AI really just complements and streamlines the situation, so that when you are actually looking for, as an example of an incident, is that it's going to be able to bring all that information to you and then centralize it so that you can now start making the decisions based on all of these, based on that specific incident. So we actually have detection on our devices of slipping and falling, or fighting, or climbing over a fence. And so what you can actually do is that you may not have someone staring at all your entire infrastructure at one point, but if someone slips and falls, it's automatically, AI is now writing you a report, and so that when you get in, you're able to now take that report, analyze it, see what the next steps are in that. And I'll give you a real life example. We have a huge fitness, and basically one of their customers was on their way into working out, tripped on the curb. And they got an alert and it wrote a report. And after that person had finished working out, the general manager came over and said, like, I just wanted to double check, like, I saw you tripped in the parking lot. Is everything okay? And they're like, I'm fine, but like, thank you very much, right? And it was that touch point that they were probably embarrassed, but it was them actually looking out to say, wait.
So you're saying they wouldn't even know without the tool, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that could be a lawsuit, that could be something, but it also can now start, like, again, fighting detection, you know what I mean? You would never even think about it, or a fake slip and fall in a health and safety kind of environment, or when you think of it in a healthcare environment, or, you know, in a retail environment, there's all these bad actors. We have a large automotive, like, oil change company in the US, and they saw it. So when the car comes in, it takes a picture of their license plate, connects directly into their system, and one of the biggest things that they were having problems with was fraud. You scratched my car, or you didn't put my oil cap back on and my engine blew. And that was costing them millions of dollars a year, and meanwhile, they can just pull up that exact transaction with all the footage of the email, or of the oil change, as well as everything, and now suddenly they can argue it, but they also get better customer service, right? Because now they also know, is like, oh, the car's been in, it's like, you know, it's time to do your wiper blades. It's now starts giving you AI analytics on something that was just a very monotonous thing, getting your oil changed, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I think basically says there's a new level of attention to detail, and otherwise these cases wouldn't be addressed or would be very labor intensive to find, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just expanding, you know, something that you need, it's table stakes inside of an organization, but now can you start getting insights from different parts of the business to make decisions, right? And that's where this kind of works. It's already an investment you're making, but having the cloud and AI abilities, you're now starting to go to different parts of the organization if they want to understand occupancy trends and all these different things. So yeah, great question.
You mentioned about rip and replace, right?
Yeah.
So what do you replace it with? Like, is it new NVRs, or is it your own tools?
Great question. So rip and replace because we own the entire stack, so we manufacture everything from the software to the cameras to access controls, all built by us. What makes us unique is that our cameras actually store the footage on the device. And then when you have an incident or something you'd like to archive, it creates a full report of all the cameras that you'd like to do, taking that footage, creating a centralized archive, and then storing it in AWS Canada.
And I assume that you can define the use cases, that this kind of use cases will trigger a notification to the GSOC team.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can actually count compound alerts. So in retail, it's like maybe someone has a fully covered face, but they have a fully covered face and a large mask. A large bag, that's a trigger for them, right? Or like we do a lot with police and community safety, is that you get AI for someone walking around the city in a hospital gown. That would typically mean they're in distress, right? And they don't require a police tactical unit, they require a community support person, right? Or, you know, different types of things like that. We can actually create those custom alerts and notify the right people through any sort of communication platform, like Teams, Slack, a text, an email, anything. It's very, very flexible when you have that kind of technology.
And is it integrated with like smoke alarms or different kind of alarms, or not yet?
We integrate with pretty much everything because of our architecture. Any API, because we basically go out and say, here's our source code. So if you want to build something to integrate with it, so great examples would be like, you know, we work closely with EMRs for our guest check-in for hospitals, but Epic is the bloodline of it. When we think of policing, like Axon body cameras and we integrate right into that. So it's just a drag and drop. So there's so many different options in terms of that, as well as long-term retention. We can build in APIs into like Azure cold storage or whatever your local kind of cold storage. We can actually just do long-term retention there as well.
Sorry, one more last question. You mentioned earlier, right? So Canada is catching up. How is the privacy concerns on this side of the border versus US? Like, is this more suitable here right now, or do you see more challenges at this point?
I think the framework's there, but there's some challenges in terms of, but being able to, having this platform is like, we can do facial recognition, we can do everything. But what you can actually do is you can actually toggle what you'd like to be looking for in terms of like attributes instead. So what we see in communities is that I'm not necessarily looking for a specific person unless I need to, or I could basically say a person in a hoodie. And then I can find that black hoodie, white shoes, and yeah. So I'm getting the hook right now, but I really thank everyone for coming. Yeah, enjoy the rest of the show. And around, we're right down outside, and come by in for a visit, and I can show you the platform. Thank you.